our final precinct question. Ms. Kadija, you'll be the first to answer. And it concerns redistricting. The topic of redistricting is a difficult one when you consider the perception of why school lines are drawn the way they are in Charlottesville. Some of those perceptions are related to race and socioeconomic levels. What are your thoughts about the topic of redistricting in Charlottesville? Are the school lines drawn in an equitable way for families who send their children to the city schools?
I think it's high time that we revisit this. It's been 35, 40, if not 40 years since the lines were drawn. And while our city may not have changed in as dramatic demographic ways as, say, the county, we as a people, I believe, have evolved over the 35 and 40 years to see things perhaps a little bit differently. It's obvious that the lines are not drawn equitably because 3 of our 6 elementary schools are on the wrong side of the tracks. And that's the perception regardless of how many wonderful teachers, administrators, and students we have in those schools. My children go to one of those, it's Clark Elementary. And I have had the pleasure of enjoying incredible academic experiences with my children there. And am very happy with the schools. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that that those schools struggle to achieve benchmarks that we agree in this community still, the SOLs, and they're just not scoring as well. And I guess what's more sad really is that the lopsided effect is affecting the children as they're entering school. So when they're first leaving their homes and entering the academic environment, they're kind of seeing a lopsided demographic, let's say, and certainly not one as broad as Charlottesville can be. I think that the opportunities here as we look at reconsolidating our preschool again and inviting the 5th graders back into the elementary schools to have a really open discussion about what will serve our whole community. And I will push for that.
Thank you. Ms. Blount.
As the lines currently stand, I believe they are fair. Our school reconfiguration process that is coming up is a natural time to reconsider it as we are moving a large population back into the elementary schools. But we need to be very cautious when we're moving children around as pawns or as a commodity, that we need to keep in mind what is ultimately best for our students, and that is a sense of continuity. It is a sense of neighborhood. We have had lots of shifts in our city, and it is important that our young people have stability in their lives, and a lot of that comes with neighborhoods, with community. We have a shifting community. Current Weldon Cooper stats have shown demographics are changing in Charlottesville. Neighborhoods do fluctuate, and we need to be careful though when we're moving children around to adjust to those adult fluctuations, that children are a little bit more sensitive to those. We also need to consider multicultural education as a benefit for all of our students, that when we're moving students around, what is the best type of education for our young people, and gaining and developing their own multicultural awareness, other factors to consider there. And all of our schools are equipped with staff capable of meeting needs of our students, and across a variety of areas. And so I would take a cautious approach to redistricting, and to have that with full community input as far as that conversation. The school board has had very good communication and has welcomed good communication with the public around that. So I'm open to the conversation.
Thank you. Ms. Neale. Yes.
So when you look at the map of our elementary school district, some obvious anomalies are clear. As Ivana mentioned, railroad tracks run east to west, and for better or worse, are the primary defining characteristic of our school boundaries. For example, when we have students on Alta Vista, 4 blocks from Clark, who attend Jackson Via 2 miles away, and if you live around Rose Hill, we're actually closer to all 5 of the other elementary schools which you attend Greenbrier. Now, those quirky boundaries are sometimes unavoidable, but the decisions result in very important outcomes like class size, transportation costs, and intangible quality of life and diversity costs as well. Those are all reasons to ask tough questions about redistricting and to be open to the possibility of adjustments if needed. But fortunately for all of us, we have 6 wonderful elementary schools, each of which is accredited and each of which has a unique culture and character. Whatever the original reason for the boundaries, many people are understandably attached to their school and their teachers. I'm not suggesting at all that we should overlook the strong connection most of our students and their families have to their schools, but I do think it's an issue to which we need to continue to pay very close attention. If adjustments are needed, we need a board with good judgment who will carefully make deliberate decisions that take into account Charlottesville's unique history, the empirical data, and students' understandable attachment to their current schools. And I feel confident I can help make that decision if it becomes a priority for the city.
Sorry, Ms. McKee.
Well, redistricting is a very fun topic, as you can tell whenever our neighboring, the rancor that erupts whenever our neighboring jurisdiction considers redistricting. Charlottesville hasn't looked at the districts in a long time, and I support looking at the districts to see if there are changes that should be made. Especially when, as Ms. Neale suggests, when neighbors essentially are going to different schools and one has to ride the bus and one can walk to their school. Those are the kinds of things that I don't know make sense and need to be looked at. At the same time, what is equitable is a community discussion. This is not my individual's opinion. And I believe that the process to looking at redistricting should be a community-wide one and transparent so that all voices would be heard. But I certainly welcome the opportunity to as a community, have that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. McKee.
I think if we look at our school boundary lines, it's hard to argue that they're necessarily logical. Fair is a tough thing to evaluate. And we do have to recognize that it's going to be a tough process to reconsider that. This is very sensitive, because if we cut to the chase about all this, there's still deep divisions in this city, and that's what school redistricting is going to bring up. There are a couple of things that we have to address as we think about it if we decide to move forward with it, and I do think we should, to be completely clear. It's been too long, and we have to pay attention to making the process deeply participatory, completely transparent, so that people are involved from the beginning, feel that they've been heard, and we also need to engage, I think, in a bit of community education so that everybody understands what the resources, what the strengths, as well as some of the challenges at every elementary school in our city actually are. We, of course, have to keep improving those schools too, so that they all are legitimately desirable schools. Certainly the other question is that we've got some enrollment issues, that certain buildings are quite full and other schools have under enrollment, so there's an opportunity there to balance our enrollment to a greater extent. But it's an issue that can be potentially quite explosive. We're dealing with kids, we're dealing with their relationships to teachers, and it has to be handled with great sensitivity. But if we do it right, there may actually be some opportunities for learning and for growth through a process like that. But it has to be handled with great sensitivity and great care. And I think the obvious point where we might start this conversation is in the event that the 5th grade does come back to the elementary schools.
Thank you, Mr. Latimer.
Thank you. I agree with those in the community that overall the attendance boundaries are okay, and that it is time to revisit the redistricting, as it's my job to listen to the community. But I also want to say that even though some of the attendance boundaries for the elementary schools don't make much sense, And some parents are concerned that their students are attending a school that's further away from the school closest to them. The fact still is that we have one middle school, Beaufort here, and one high school, CHS. And no matter where you live in the city, these kids in middle and high schools have to get to Beaufort or get to CHS. There is no alternative. And I want to voice my support for in-district school choice for students and parents. I support putting magnet schools in the elementary schools because I believe that students and parents deserve to be in the school that is the best fit for them. I believe that is their educational right. And if we have some type of in-district school choice, it could solve some problems that people are perceiving with attendance boundaries. And finally, I wish to add that I believe we can be successful as a city in recruiting at least one quality charter or lab school. I see you, Brevi Cannon, just walked in. Hello, Brevi. It's good to see you again.
You too, Steve.
And I was so thankful you voiced your support for charter and lab schools in the city this past August as a way to reduce the achievement gap. Thank you, Brevi, for being here.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Ms. Laufer.
Well, certainly the notion that if you can walk to school, you should be allowed to attend it. It has a lot of merit. Of course, it creates more community. You know your neighbors, and if you miss the bus, you know what? You can walk. You're not going to miss school for the day. But I've talked to a lot of people about this, and there is a certain allegiance to your school. I think it would be a very difficult discussion. And with that being said, though, if people are truly interested in this, I would definitely attend to it. I mean, the boundaries do look very confusing. But while we're on this topic, something I think we really need to consider is that there's about 2,000 children ages 5 to 19 in our city that don't go to our city schools. They're enrolled in private and other school and homeschooling. And if we focused on marketing our schools and recruiting some of those families, not only would we help with our budget, but we'd also further strengthen the community in our schools. So I think that's something we really need to consider. Maybe ads that we could take out. I just talked to somebody that used to do this years ago. Peggy Van Years, about 10 years ago. Anyway, that is my idea, trying to get other kids back into our schools as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we just have a round of applause for our candidates?